Hello, YouTube, and welcome back to another book review from me, your host, Logan Albright. Today, it's been a while since I did a classic, right? I'm talking about Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. I don't know if it's Makepeace or Makepeace or something like that. I say Makepeace, but it's nice to make peace, so I appreciate that. Now, my experience with Thackeray before is very limited. The only thing I know about him is that he wrote the novel, which the film Barry Lyndon is based on, the Stanley Kubrick film. And Barry Lyndon is one of my very favorite films. I'm a huge Kubrick fan, and that one I think is one of his finest and most beautiful works. And one of the things I love about that film is the way it kind of tracks the progress of this person who starts off seeming kind of poor and admirable and like trying to raise his station in the world and going after social mobility in a world that doesn't really allow social mobility. And then his ambition and his dishonesty and his opportunism sort of turn against him, and he ends up getting what's coming to him in a sort of tragic finale. And I love that kind of rise and fall narrative. I think it's great. Vanity Fair has a very similar kind of narrative, although it's different in many ways as well. I have not read the novel that Barry Lyndon is based on, but I have seen the film. So that's what I knew going into this. And I saw somebody on YouTube talking about this and saying it was a great novel. And I happened to find this copy in a used bookstore, which is a little bit of a weird edition. It's the Quality Book Club paperback classic edition. A little bit strange. It seems like it's a little, budget as an edition, but I saw it in a bookstore for I think a few bucks, and I thought I'd pick it up and read it. And it took me a long time to read this book. It's very long. It's about 750 pages in this edition, and it's very dense. There's a lot of names. There's a lot of characters. It's written in a kind of slightly Baroque style. This came out in the mid-19th century as a serialized novel, like many of Dickens's novels were. They were serially published, so it's not exactly concise. It really kind of goes for the word count on this, and it took me a long time. And I had a little bit of an emotional journey going through it. I liked it initially, and then I got very, very bored in the middle, and it took me a long time to plow through the middle section of it, and then I liked it a lot again at the end. So I'm slightly ambivalent towards whether I actually liked it or not. It's subtitled A Novel Without a Hero, and I think there's a couple of ways to understand that subtitle. I'm not sure how Thackeray intended it, but one way to interpret it is that there's loads and loads of characters, and it's not really about one person and their journey. It's about lots of different people living in this. It's a sort of a social satire in 19th century England and elsewhere, set against the backdrop of the Napoleonic Wars. And there's, of course, the colonies in India that are dealt with, and there's military adventurism, and there's romance, a lot of romantic entanglements and family drama, and it's all these different families and all these different people sort of all intermingling and having these separate plots that are slightly intertwined. It's very complex, and I found a lot of it slightly difficult to follow because like I said, there's many, many characters, and they all have multiple names. Sometimes they're referred to by their first name, sometimes by their last name, sometimes by their title, sometimes by their rank in the military. A lot of the sons and the fathers have the same names, so it's kind of hard to keep track of at first, and it took me a while to kind of get a handle on who all these people were and how they related to each other. But I'm off track because I was going to talk about the novel without a hero. The other sense in which I see the novel without a hero is that the ostensibly principal character, the protagonist, if there is such a thing, is a woman named Rebecca Sharp, and we kind of commence the novel with her leaving this girls' school and going out into society. She's a woman of somewhat low birth who's been orphaned and has to kind of make her way in the world as best she can. And we'll come to more about Becky, but I regard her as not a particularly heroic character. Indeed, very similar to Barry Lyndon. She's quite opportunistic and quite ambitious in a way that's not very virtuous in most of the cases. So you can regard the novel without a hero in those kind of two senses, and that it's not really about one person, and then the one person that it sort of is about is not very heroic. So I found that interesting. Now, Becky Sharp is listed on the back cover of this novel as one of the most memorable characters in literature. I don't know if I go that far. I think she's an interesting character, but I find her characterization worthy of note because, like I said, she's certainly far from virtuous. And I find, as the novel went along, I kind of initially expected to like her because she's intelligent and she's enterprising and she's, trying to make her way in the world from coming from not a very good situation. And you kind of have to admire that opportunism, not that opportunism, but that enterprise, that willingness to try to, do what it takes to get along in the world. But as it goes along, it becomes clear that she's not a very moral or virtuous person, and that it's all about status and money for her. And, and I have to appreciate that in this society, in England in the 19th century, without a lot of social mobility, where everything is based on class, and especially for women who didn't have a lot of professional opportunities open to them, you have to understand that they would really be fixated on like trying to ensure their safety and their security. And I kind of get that. But she marries someone that she doesn't love in order to get kind of ahead in the world. She has a child who she clearly doesn't care about. The novel goes so far as to tell you that she doesn't care about the child. She only kind of is affectionate with him in public as a performance to kind of get on other people's good sides. She's extremely manipulative. She's extremely ambitious. Everything is sort of with an ulterior motive of trying to get more money or more social position. She deals dishonestly with people. She deals dishonestly with men, trying to wheedle them out of their cash under false pretenses. She lies a lot. She is unfaithful to her husband a lot. She's just, a bad person. And so I kind of appreciated there's a similar arc to Barry Lyndon in her sort of rise and fall, which I won't get too much into to avoid spoilers, but it doesn't end particularly well for Becky. And I appreciate that. I like to see characters get their comeuppance, which is always fun for me. And then there's other characters who are, more likable and more interesting. I didn't find the military stuff too compelling. The Becky's arc is my favorite part of the story, and that's the part that I was most interested in when I was reading it. It's the part that I wanted to pick up and find out what happened to. And so, like, she disappears for large portions of the novel in the middle, and there's other characters that are focused on, and I didn't care so much about that. I wanted to get back to her and her story, because although she's not likable, she is interesting and engaging as a character. So there's that. The satire, I think, is pretty good. It kind of shows what society is like in those days, and it can be humorous in times. The narrator has a very pronounced voice in the novel. He will often interject with kind of commentary about what's going on, which is sort of fun. It can be funny in places. The title Vanity Fair is sort of Thackeray's comment on society being largely pointless and a waste of time, and this kind of the antics of human beings that they get up to during life being ultimately futile, because we all die in the end anyway, so what does it matter? It's not really as bleak as that, but he's sort of just I think he's sort of mocking this idea that like going after money and power and privilege and fame and all this stuff, it really doesn't amount to much at the end of the day, and it's sort of all in vain. And so he keeps referring to the events of the drama as a fair, a vanity fair, a fair that is focused on vain and pointless activities. And so that's what the title is about. And he recalls that title many times during the text and kind of editorializing about the characters and what's going on with them. What else to say about Vanity Fair? I think the portrayal of the battle of the sexes is somewhat interesting. Most of the women, not all of the women, but most of the women are portrayed as somewhat scheming and shrewd and sharp and interested in things like money and power and privilege and working towards those things and trying to manage their husband's affairs and sort of being in charge behind the scenes and being in control of the situation. Most of the men are portrayed as a bit stupid and more interested in just kind of having fun and drinking and smoking and going to the club and gambling and hanging out with their friends. And kind of a little bit clueless and not really, wise to what's going on behind the scenes. Becky manages to successfully manipulate a great deal of men who are completely blind to her artifice and her duplicitous nature, whereas a lot of the women see through her right away, which is pretty funny and pretty interesting. She's very quick to kind of turn on the tears and the waterworks and be like, oh, woe is me, I'm a victim, feel sorry for me. And a lot of the men fall for it because she apparently is beautiful and charming, and the women don't fall for it as much. So, I mean, you can say that's sort of a sexist portrayal on both, in both genders. The men are not portrayed in a very good light, and the women are not portrayed in a very good light, but they are portrayed differently. And it seems to be this attitude at the time of, the women being much more, involved in worldly affairs and worried about money and worried about power and worried about privilege and, trying to actively take steps to ensure those things, whereas the men are sort of just bumbling foolishly along and not really caring about anything like that. I thought that was quite interesting. My emotional reaction to the novel is a little bit mixed. Like I said, I found it very long and boring in spots. I had a little bit of trouble getting through it at times. It did take me a long time to read. I did find other parts of it very engaging and somewhat funny. It's overall well written for sure, but it was a chore to get through in a certain sense. So, I mean, I'd say it's a good novel. I'd say it's one worth reading, but I can't give it an extremely high score because I didn't, enjoy large portions of it. I feel like it could have used an editor. It falls prey to this kind of serialization problem that a lot of 19th century works have, where they just don't have an editor. They just go on for chapters and chapters and chapters because they're being published every week or every month in a magazine, and you get paid by the word. So the more words, the better. And I don't want to sound like I don't like 19th century literature, because I do. I've gone on record many times on this channel about how much I love 19th century literature and how many of my favorite authors are from that time period. But it can be a little bit bloated sometimes, and I think this is an example of that. But I did want to read it, and I'm glad I read it. And I probably want to read the Barry Lyndon novel at some point as well, because I do love that film. Although I think the plot is probably, or the theme, I shouldn't say the plot, but the themes of, ambition and opportunism backfiring will be very similar in that. I would like to read it just because of what a fan of the film I am. So that was my thought on Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. Certainly glad I read it, but I'm glad it's over as well because it did take a long time. We are 2 weeks away from Halloween, my favorite time of year, and I haven't done as much spooky season content on this channel as I usually like to do. I do have a book of scary short stories coming up to review very soon. I also want to do some horror movie content because I love horror movies, so I'll be doing that very shortly as well within the next 2 weeks so that people will have something scary to talk about for Halloween. I will be listing some of my favorite horror movies and maybe some of the more recent ones I've acquired from my collection, because I'd like to collect horror movie Blu-rays to a certain extent. It's not a huge collection, but I like to get them when I can. So that's what I have coming up. I hope you'll check back next Wednesday, and probably before then I might do another movie review kind of off hours, not on a Wednesday, just an additional bonus video. But check back. I do another book review video every Wednesday, and I'll be back for that. And if you enjoyed this review, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications. Leave me comments down below, which I will read and respond to, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you later.